Management Council. Today's date is January 26, 2021, and the time is 6:08 p.m. We're here tonight via Zoom platform, the rules of which will be explained in a few minutes by our moderator, Mr. Moore. For council members, I will call out everyone's name. When I call your name, if you can indicate that you're here. I'll start with myself, Jennifer Cervenka, Chair. Raymond Koya, Vice Chair.
Ray Koya is present.
Thank you. Don Gomez, Member.
Don Gomez, present.
Mike Hudner, Member.
Mike Hudner, present.
Patricia Reynolds, Member.
Patricia Reynolds, present.
And finally, Ron Gagnon, Member.
Ron Gagnon here.
Okay, and for agency staff, we have our Executive Director, Jeffrey Willis.
Here.
Our Deputy Director, Jim Boyd.
Here, Madam Chair.
Our Chief Legal Counsel, Tony DeSisto.
Here, Madam Chair.
Our Aquaculture Coordinator, Ben Getz.
Here, Madam Chair.
Our Supervising Biologist, Dave Reese.
Here, Madam Chair.
Our Supervising Engineer, Rich Lucia.
Here, Madam Chair.
Our Recording Secretary, Lisa Turner.
Here, Madam Chair.
Ryan Moore, our Moderator.
Here, Madam Chair.
And Cindy Tagney, our Court Reporter.
Present.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Moore, I'll turn it over to you to run through the rules of our meeting.
Madam Chair. This is the Coastal Resources Management Council Virtual Subcommittee Meeting 1/26/2021, conducted in accordance with Executive Order 20-46, 107th Supplemental Emergency Declaration, Extension of Executive Orders. A note to participants, please be advised, this is an online meeting including all audio, video, and names and comments visible in the chat box are being recorded. All members of the public who wish to comment during this proceedings must correctly identify themselves before proceeding. If you're having problems with your computer audio, use these phone numbers listed below for this meeting. The meeting ID and password will also be posted in the chat box. Council members, applicants, and CRMC staff, please turn your video on. Do not use phone and computer audio at the same time. Raise your hand or use the raise hand button to be recognized by the chair. Identify yourself by name. Use the chat box to communicate any issues with audio or video to the moderator. Members of the public, please turn your video off. Mute your microphone when not speaking. Use the raise hand function to be recognized by the chair. Wait to be recognized by the chair and unmuted by the moderator to speak. Identify yourself by first and last name. For those on the phone, please press *9 to use the raise hand function. When recognized, identify yourself by first and last name. Use the chat box to indicate any issues with audio or video to the moderator. Q&A will be disabled.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Okay, moving to our agenda, our first item, which is the approval of the minutes of our January 12th, 2021 meeting. Those were circulated by Lisa Turner. I've reviewed it, looks to be in order, and I would entertain a motion to approve.
Madam Chair, Ray Koya moves to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Koya. Is there a second to that motion?
Ron Gagnon, second.
Thank you, Mr. Gagnon. I'll do a roll call, and when I call out your name, indicate aye or nay. Ray Koya, Vice
Ray
Chair.
Koya votes aye.
Don Gomez.
Don Gomez, aye.
Mike Hudner.
Mike Hudner, aye.
Patricia Reynolds.
Patricia Reynolds, aye.
Gagnon.
Ron Gagnon, aye.
And myself, Jennifer Cervenka, aye. The meeting minutes from January 12th, 2021 are approved. Moving on to subcommittee reports. Mr. Boyd.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. One brief subcommittee report out to the council this evening. The council's Planning and Procedures Subcommittee met earlier today, January the 26th, to consider proposed amendments to the council's management procedures identified as 650-RICR-10-00-1. The proposed amendments are delete subsection 1.4.6A10 to remove the required petition for declaratory ruling filing fee. Amend subsection 1.4.9 to remove the required petition for regulatory changes filing fee and to add specific requirements for filing materials under such a petition. And finally, under subsection 1.5.9A, presentation of expert and lay testimony, the amendment specifies the necessary filings and increases the number of days from 5 to 7 prior to a council hearing that materials need to be filed with the CRMC. The Planning and Procedures Subcommittee voted to approve for rulemaking the proposed management procedure amendments as presented. Staff will prepare and file the necessary filings with the Office of Regulatory Reform, and following ORR approval, CRMC staff will issue a public notice for rulemaking, advertising a 30-day comment period, and a public hearing of the council to be held at a later date. And that concludes the subcommittee report, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Okay, well, as you know, I talked with you about this earlier today, so I have
Correct.
no questions. Anyone who's not on that subcommittee on the council have any questions for Mr. Boyd? And this is just an informational report out for subsequent action at a later meeting.
That is correct, Madam Chair. As I mentioned, we will be filing with ORR, and then we will issue a public notice, provide for a 30-day public comment period, and the council will hold a public hearing on the amendments at a later date in the coming months.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving on to Mr. Willis and his report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have two brief announcements to make. One is that you've already recognized Mr. Boyd as our permanent deputy director. So congratulations, obviously, to Jim on that. And also, however, we are losing a staff to retirement on Friday, Janet Friedman, our coastal geologist.
Oh, no.
Well, she is unfortunately retiring from state service, so we will miss her incredibly, and her vast knowledge of obviously coastal geologic processes, but her input and insights into the program and the management of it will be missed as well. So we will have to wish her good wishes on her way out and immediately begin the process to seek a coastal geologist for her replacement.
Thank you. Is that all for you?
That is it, Madam Chair.
Okay, all right. Brief tonight.
Very brief.
Any questions anyone has for Mr. Willis? All right, moving right along. We will go to our first matter. It's a request for a fourth and final extension. This is A 2008-09-121 Tiverton Partners.
Madam Chair, may I interrupt for 1 second?
Yes.
And I apologize for not bringing this up earlier, but we had a request to withdraw an application on tonight's agenda. And before you had gotten into the agenda, I just thought it would be important to bring it up. The Rosman application 2018 4-096, we received a letter from the Rosman's council asking us to withdraw their application with prejudice. They will be looking, the Rosmans will be looking potentially at other opportunities for their property on Block Island, and felt that a withdrawal of their application was more appropriate at this time.
Thank you. Since you brought it up, are you looking for, and Tony, do we need a motion to accept the withdrawal, or does it speak for itself?
No, Madam Chair, you do need to vote on it because once staff reports have been written, only the council can accept withdrawals.
Okay,
I agree with that, Madam Chair. You need to vote to accept the withdrawal. By the way, it's without prejudice. I'm sorry, it's with prejudice.
Right,
That's the request from legal counsel.
yes.
and that means that they cannot bring back a substantially similar application at a later time, correct?
That's correct, yes.
All right,
Madam Chair,
yes, Mr.
would
Hudner.
entertain a motion to approve the withdrawal.
Okay, thank you,
moved.
Mr. Hudner. Is there a second?
Ray Coyer
Gomez will
seconds.
second.
Okay, Don Gomez seconded the motion. I support the motion to withdraw in light of the staff report on this, which was a recommended denial. So I think it's an appropriate way to go. So if there's any other comments, I'll take them. Any other discussion before I do a roll call? Okay, if none, I'll do the roll call. Ray Coya,
Ray Coyer votes aye.
Don Gomez,
Don Gomez, aye.
Mike Hudner,
Hudner, aye.
Patricia Reynolds,
Reynolds, aye.
Ron Gagnon,
Ron Gagnon, aye.
and myself, Jennifer Cervenka, aye. The motion to approve the withdrawal carries. And that's taken off the agenda for this evening, which was the third item. And was both Mr. Reese and Mr. Lucia here for that?
Mr. Reese was here just in case you had any questions. Mr. Lucia is here for the extension request.
Oh, he is. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Reese? I don't.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. Okay, so moving back to our request for the fourth and final extension of Tiverton Partners. Mr. Lucia, are you going to be speaking to this request and the basis and the standard for the request?
Madam Chair, Rich is here to answer questions if you had any. The applicant is
Okay.
also here to
Okay.
explain why they wanted it, but as you can see in the council's agenda package, we had enforcement staff go out to the site as is practice. And their report showed that the site is in conformance with the assent as originally issued and therefore had no objections for issuing its extension. However, the applicant is here and we also have Rich as technical staff if you had any questions along those lines.
Okay, I do have a question for Mr. Lucia. One of the findings that we need to make is that there have been no changes to the CRMP that would require a variance or a special exception. Can you answer that?
Yes, Madam Chair. This actually had a couple of two other modifications to the stormwater system, and that actually was probably the only big changes with those modifications. But overall, I would say there was no significant regulation changes that would alter the review that was previously conducted for the original application for the
Okay.
site.
And other than the stormwater, there's no substantial change in the environmental conditions at the site?
No, the feature appears to be as previously assented.
And there's been the start of construction. There's been substantial construction already?
I wasn't there the last time. That was Brian Harrington, but I did talk to Brian Harrington of enforcement. He says, yes, there's been significant construction at the site and it's been moving along.
Okay. And is it your opinion that there's good cause for this request to extend?
Yes, in my opinion, there's good cause for the extension at this time.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Lucia before I turn it over to the applicant? Okay, if none, then I would invite the applicant or applicant's representative to make comments and speak to what we've been discussing.
Madam Chair, Jan Greenwood from Woodward and Curran is on to represent the request.
Okay,
Was.
let's, yes. I think you need to
Okay.
unmute and put your video on.
Oh, I don't have the video on. It's
Okay,
behind
you're
me.
just like Mr. Hudner.
My desk is too small. If I could take a minute and do that if it's important.
It's fine. You're nice and clear. If you
Okay.
want to speak to the basis for the request so that we can make the determination that there's good cause. And if you could also address the construction that has been undertaken already.
Okay, so this project involves multiple condominium units and buildings. Most of them have been constructed, and basically they are constructed based on the sales of the units. So they don't build way too many buildings before they are able to sell them. And so the pace of the construction is based on the unit sales. And right now their current rate of sales is about 8 to 10 units per year. So at that rate, there's 10 buildings remaining with about 22 units in them. And so that by the time this consent expires on March 15th, they won't all have been built yet. And I can't remember exactly how many units there are. And I think Jordan Stone is in the meeting and he might remember offhand, and I should.
I think he just joined.
Jordan, do you remember how many units there are all together? That's probably my job. It was originally 290 and it dropped substantially.
Okay.
So there's a lot.
Mr. Stone, you're muted if you're trying to talk.
My apologies.
No problem.
So, I'm sorry, the question was the number of units right now, Jan?
How many are there altogether? I can't remember how many we ended up with altogether, and I know how many are left to. We've got 10 buildings and 22 units left, but I can't remember how many there are altogether.
I think all together off the top of my head, I believe there were 220. And we're at the vagaries of the market, so we continue to move along. The project has been very successful, and we are getting towards the end, and just thought that it would be a good idea to get this last extension as time permits.
Sorry, I dropped off. You're gonna have to repeat some. I can tell you where I dropped off at. The question was, how many are there all together? I can't remember how many we ended up with all together, and I know how many are left too. We've got 10 buildings, and then I lost. I dropped. Can you please?
I'm sorry. So the total project, and again, I'm doing this off the top of my head, is approximately 220 units, which is downgraded from the original project. We are at the vagaries of the market, but we continue to sell. Continues to be a successful project, and we thought at this time it was just a good idea to go in for our last extension.
Yeah, that seems pretty straightforward to me, and that all the criteria have been met to request a fourth extension. Are there questions that council members have for either Ms. Greenwood or Mr. Stone?
I'll share an observation if I may. It's Mike
Yes, Mr.
Hudson.
Hudner.
You know, this project is on the site of what was an oil terminal, Northeast Petroleum, and it started kind of with the Boathouse Restaurant, which has been a huge amenity for the surrounding communities. And I think it has a catchment area that's much greater than that because it's quite close to the highway, Route 24. And it's been a great project. So it's nice they can keep it going, finish it out. It's a lot more attractive than the fuel oil terminal, the heating oil terminal. So I think it's great. I hope they can get them all sold.
Yeah. Thank you for that background.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Gomez.
I'd just like to follow up a little bit on what Mike had to say, and that is that there is a fisherman's right-of-way and a right-of-way to the shore that's associated with that. And I believe it's over near the restaurant and a pier that goes out. So that was another good step forward because it does get a lot of use along with the restaurant. So I just, again, support it and agree with Mike. I don't miss the oil tanks. So.
Any other questions or comments? Anything else from Ms. Greenwood or Mr. Stone?
Nothing from
Nothing
me.
else.
Okay. I'll open it up to the public if any member of the public. Actually, I don't even know if we're supposed to do that. Let me ask Mr. DeSisto.
Actually, I think it's appropriate at this stage, yes.
Okay, all right. If there's any members of the public who would like to make a comment for or against this request, now is your time, and you just need to raise your hand and be recognized. Mr. Moore can admit you. And Mr. Moore, you'll need to let me know if you see anyone. I
am not seeing any hands.
Yeah, I don't see any either. Okay, so I'm going to close the public comment period, public hearing, and I'll entertain a motion.
I move the extension be granted.
Thank you, Mr. Hudner. Is there a second? Mr. Gomez, I saw your hand but didn't hear your voice.
And that's only because I muted myself. So,
right.
yes, I will second Mike's motion.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, I'm going to do a roll call. Ray Koya,
Ray Coyer votes aye.
Don Gomez,
Gomez, aye.
Mike Hudner,
Hudner, aye.
Patricia Reynolds,
Reynolds, aye.
Ron Gagnon,
Ron Gagnon, aye.
and myself, Jennifer Cervenka, aye. The motion to approve the fourth and final extension carries, and you have an additional year from Mr. Willis. Can you remind me from tonight's?
It will not be from tonight. It'll be
Okay.
from the original extension date.
From the original extension date. And so when do they have until now?
They will have,
It's March sometime, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I do have in my notes, March
March 3rd.
15th, 2021 is
March 15th. That's correct.
when it would expire. So they'll have until March 15th of 2022.
Correct.
Okay, great. All right, moving on to our last matter, which is an application that's been out to notice and is before council for decision 2019-10-047 East Beach Oyster Co. LLC. And Mr. Getz, you're going to provide the staff report for us?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, so this is an application for the expansion and reconfiguration of an existing farm. So it's a little unique in that they propose shifting the original farm to the west and then expanding that to the north a little bit to create about approximately 5 more acres of the approximately 10-acre site. So total site would be 15.6 acres. This is the westernmost site, aquaculture site in Ninigret Pond. The review of this application, discussion with DEM and others have indicated that development of aquaculture further west in this area would probably not be appropriate for a number of reasons. There's a shellfish management area and other recreational uses. However, this application received no objections during the 30 days. It is before the council tonight because it is over a 10-acre site and requires council approval. The correspondence on this application, again, no objections from the various agencies. Fish and Wildlife did have a request, though they had no objection. They had a request that the winter working hours be incorporated as a condition or stipulation here. My predecessor, Dave Butel, in correspondence with DEM, indicated that that would not be appropriate. The concerns surrounding those working hours have to do with, foraging birds on mud flats and interference with waterfowl hunting, none of which is in the vicinity of this site. It's rather farther offshore, kind of in the more towards the center of the western lobe of the pond. So other than that, the survey discovered a low density of quahogs, much like previous surveys in this area. Also, no eelgrass was found. One thing I would note is that Ninigret is, again, getting closer to the 5% limit if this application is approved. Currently, let me just refer to some of these numbers here. Currently, there's 67 and a half acres, at least in the pond, in Ninigret Pond, and there's about 1,647 acres total. To remind the council, that is based on the salt pond SAMPs, determine the total acreage of these ponds at low tide, which we use for the 5% calculation. With the approval of this site, it's really only a net gain of a little more than 5 acres. It would bring the pond to 72.46 acres, which would be about 4.4%. It'd be bringing it up from 4.1%. So the total available acreage under the 5% rule for Ninigret Pond would be 82.35 acres. So there's still about 10 acres left before that cap is hit. Practically speaking, however, based on how the industry has progressed in this area, I wouldn't expect. I might not even expect it to reach the 5%. That most of the area is probably taken up, and except for maybe a few farms that could expand a few acres here or there, there's probably not much room for further expansion. But with that, I would recommend this application for approval without modification.
What category is this considered? I know you need our approval. There's no objectors. Is it B? Is it a category B?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Yeah. And you believe that it satisfies the criteria, the legal standards for category B applications?
Yes.
Okay. Just a question on is it Division of Wildlife, the RIDEM department that suggested the limitation of the winter hours. Is that put into all of the aquaculture leases that are considered? Is it
No,
late?
not necessarily.
Okay.
It's often brought up in instances where there is waterfowl hunting or the presence of the species of concern, such as piping plover, things like that. So
Is there a disagreement that the department has over whether or not those things exist here?
I don't believe so. Based on, I mean, again, Fish and Wildlife stated no objection. However, they did have the request for the winter working hours.
Okay.
We don't feel it's appropriate here. It is appropriate in other areas, and we do implement it in those areas.
Okay, thank you. Does that complete your report?
Yes, it does, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from Mr. Getz? Mr. Gomez, you're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going through the DEM write-up, and they had a comment on the piping plovers, as I think that was for part of the reason that they wanted to do the winter hours, but they were seemed to be concerned about that. But then I think they finally went ahead and said there would be minimal impact. So I just wanted to know if we were in agreement with that statement.
Yeah, I think so with the regards to the piping plovers and other foraging birds of concern, it's really to do with the interference on the mudflats, where at low tide, the birds would forage for food, which is important for them during their migration. This site is in deep water, probably 1,400 feet from any intertidal area.
So we are well away from them.
Yes, yeah, and in fact, I will mention that it was staff opinion in the past that the DEM, for CRMC to accept some of these restrictions, they would like to see DEM put similar restrictions on other activities within their jurisdiction and purview. Not all activities are restricted in this way in areas where there might be species of concern. For instance, anyone could go and recreational shellfish on an intertidal mudflat during that season.
Sure, as long as that was considered, I just noted it, and it seemed to stand out pretty significantly. And then you've corroborated, I guess, my thinking on it and the rationale for approving it.
Yeah, I will say that I have been in working with some folks from URI on aquaculture bird interactions. They're doing a study of a couple of farms throughout the state in salt ponds. And interestingly, I think they're using drone technology and other types of observation to document what possible interactions or effects there might be from aquaculture on some of these species, because there's not a ton of evidence really that there is a negative interaction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. Any other comments or questions? Okay, if none, then I'd like to invite the applicant into the participant part of the meeting to make any presentation or comments that the applicant would like. Mr. Moore, do you see someone from East Beach Oyster Co?
If they could please raise their hand.
Madam Chair, Nick Papa is in as a panelist.
Okay.
Hello, this is Nicholas Papa here. I can't seem to get the video working.
That's okay. It seems to be a theme tonight, so we can hear you. And are you here on behalf of the East Beach Oyster Co. matter?
Yes, I am, Madam Chair.
All right. Would you like to make any presentation or make any comments on the staff report that was just presented?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Do any council members have questions for this applicant? Okay. If none, then I would ask if there's any members of the public that would like to speak on this matter. And if you do, would you please raise your hand, or Mr. Moore, if they're participating by phone, is it *9? *9. Do you see anyone, Mr. Moore?
I do not, Madam Chair.
Okay. Then I'm going to, if there's nothing further from Mr. Papa, then I'm going to close the public hearing portion, and I will entertain a motion.
Do you like a motion to close the public hearing or motion to?
I'm sorry, no, I just closed it myself.
So you'd like a motion to approve the application? I so move.
Yes.
Hudner.
Thank you, Mr. Hudner.
Don Gomez, second.
Thank you. You could have got a motion, but you had to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Any further discussion? Okay, if none, I'm going to do a roll call. Ray Koya,
Ray Coyer votes aye.
Don Gomez,
Don Gomez, aye.
Mr. Hudner,
Hudner, aye.
Patricia Reynolds,
Reynolds, aye.
Ron Gagnon,
Ron Gagnon, aye.
and myself, Jennifer Cervenka, aye. Okay, Mr. Papa, your application is approved, and good luck to you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. All right, with that, I think we're at our end, and I'll move to adjourn.
Can I say congratulations to Jim Boyd first?
Oh, yes, yes.
Congrats, Jim. Sorry, I'm waving to you, but you can't see it. Take my word for it.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much, and I appreciate the confidence not only of Jeff, but also of the council members. It's my pleasure to serve now in capacity as official deputy director.
Great. Do we need a motion to adjourn? So moved.
Yes, yeah, I think I moved, it doesn't matter, but
Okay.
all those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.
As well, be safe.
Stay warm.
Yeah.